Today we have a very special guest. Happy to welcome Comrade Kavitha Krishnan, Secretary of All India Progressive Women's Association and Politbureau member of the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist Liberation. She is one of the editors of the CPI Liberation's party magazine Libration. Comrade Kavitha entered into politics through students' movement and activism in the year 93-94. She was the Joint Secretary of JNU Student Union in the year 1996, and from that she has been active in the People's Movement for last 25 years. Today she is going to share with us on caste and gender violence and her party intervention on the same. Her party resistance, that is Communist Party of India Marxist-Leninist Liberation's resistance to Batani Dola massacre in 1996, in which 25 Dalits were killed, and in 1997 in Lakshmanpur Bate, in which 58 Dalits were killed by the so-called upper caste army of Ranveer Sena, is very much necessary to mention to the listeners now. Ranveer Sena of the so-called upper caste army was challenged by her party Lal Sena. There are many such heroic struggles, and we can have a separate session for that. And now I would like to welcome Comrade Kavitha to speak to the audience. Thank you.
Hi, Karthik and everyone else. It's a pleasure to speak to all of you. I was told actually to speak about caste and gender in today's political scene in India. So what I will be speaking about is not only about our own party's resistance and all of that, although I will also speak about that. But also I'll try and map the larger climate and larger situation in India on caste and gender and contemporary politics under the Modi government at the center and so many BJP governments in states. Okay? And you may have noticed recently that the National Crime Records Bureau data has come out for the year 2016 quite recently. And not surprisingly, it marks a spike in atrocities against Dalits in the last year as compared to the previous year, 2015. And it also, these data also punctures the notion that somehow caste ceases to matter in cities, because the data very clearly shows that even in 19 metropolitan cities in India, crimes against Dalits are very high, and they follow the same pattern as that for rural areas in the same state. So Lucknow and Patna data will match the figures for UP and Bihar, like that. And also another significant aspect of this violence against Dalits is that a very large component of these attacks comprises attacks against women. So attacks against Dalit women is a major component. Now we have to notice, when we are talking about data, we also have to remember that these are basically reported cases of atrocities against Dalits that have been counted as such, that have been counted as atrocities against Dalits under either the IPC law or the atrocities against SC/ST law. And even beyond that, there's a lot of structural violence that goes on. So even beyond rapes and humiliations and public humiliations and public stripping and parading and so on, and all these forms of violence, there's also a lot of structural violence against Dalits. For instance, the very fact that a very large number of the bulk of sanitation work in India is done by Dalits. And as has been flagged by sanitation workers all the time, a lot of, most of sanitation work in India includes manual scavenging. So although the government has an official position saying manual scavenging does not exist, manual scavenging is illegal and it doesn't happen, it does happen, not only in the more obvious ways where in feudal cultures in rural India, Dalits are supposed to clean dry toilets in homes and so on, but even in, say, a public sector government concern like the Indian Railways, or even in, sewage cleaning in cities and so on. And not only that, this work is extremely dangerous even beyond its demeaning nature, of course, it's also very dangerous because you have a very large number of sewerage deaths in India. For instance, in just the month of August, in just the city of Delhi, you had 10 deaths happening. And that gives you a sense of how high these numbers can go. And the fact that I'm flagging all this also because it does relate to contemporary politics in a very direct way. Because in the current government that we have in Delhi speaks very volubly and eloquently. The Prime Minister himself keeps talking about Swachh Bharat, which means, clean India. So there's this entire cleanliness drive which is supposed to eradicate open defecation. And in itself, this campaign is also, it uses many of the tactics of demeaning and shaming that actually are drawn from caste atrocities. So the idea of photographing women or people who are defecating in the open, making these photographs public, making the videos public, publicly shaming them, throwing stones at them, and so on and so forth. So even the kinds of, methods, the tactics of humiliation used are actually drawn from caste atrocities, number one. And the other thing is also the fact that this campaign absolutely and very deliberately avoids talking about manual scavenging. So officially, if you go to websites of the government and so on, they say that this campaign also intends to eradicate manual scavenging. But if you look at it, it does, on the ground, it does absolutely nothing in this regard. And what could be done is, for instance, one of the things, very obvious things to be done, is to use technology to eradicate the need for manual scavenging, the need for workers to do to come into contact with human excreta in, say, the Indian railways or sewerage in cities and so on, right? But to use machines to do these jobs, to use technology to ensure that excreta does not fall on the tracks and so on, but railway tracks and so on. But it does not do any of this. And instead you have a lot of rhetoric, but what you have is sanitation work is being privatized and contractualized. So you have widespread contractualization, which means the official government body, say the water works in a city like Bangalore or like Delhi, is able to say officially we don't have any manual scavengers. We don't ask workers to go into the sewers and clean. But in reality, that's exactly what's happening. In reality, sanitation workers, so on paper, they will say sanitation workers are given all the equipment and so on and so forth, and we employ so-and-so number of sanitation workers. But in reality, a larger number is employed, and they are employed through contractors. So the entire liability for ensuring the safety of the worker, ensuring they don't have to do manual scavenging, ensuring they have the equipment, they have the gloves, they have the machinery, and so on and so forth, all that lies on the contractor. So the government tries to shrug off responsibility as an employer for these things. So one of our struggles, contemporary struggles, is in fact if you look at Bangalore city, where our trade union there, the AICCQ, has a very vibrant union of of sanitation workers. Most of them are women, by the way, sanitation workers in the city of Bangalore. So they have some very remarkable struggles where they have struggled for minimum wages to be raised and for them to be given minimum wages in the first place. And also they have, they have campaigned to create awareness about the fact that they are denied basic safety equipment and all of that. And their struggles are very inspiring. And among their demands, I have also been very struck by the fact that if you look at the kind of struggles they have done, they also highlight the need, the rights that workers have for leisure and pleasure. So the idea that they deserve leave. At one such protest on 8th March, the Women's Day, at one of the daughters of the sanitation worker who was one of the sanitation workers who was striking work that day, she told the media, when the media was asking the mother, why do you want paid leave? The daughter said, I'll tell you. And she said, my mother would like time. I would like time to go with my mother to the park. So otherwise she has no leave at all throughout the month, throughout the week. And all of this. So I say this to say that basically these struggles are struggles which encompass a lot of, they're not just economic demands, They're the demand for dignity, the demand for wages as well as dignity, of course. So these struggles that happen in so many parts of the country. So and if you look at it, see the fact that Dalits are supposed to do this kind of demeaning, dirty work, okay, and then they will be ostracized for the same and subjected to ostracism and violence for the same, is something that has witnessed a lot of very powerful protests across the country by a variety of forces. I'll just flag two quickly, which have been very significant in recent times. One was, of course, at Una last year, where Dalits are supposed to, they are assigned the job of getting rid of the carcasses of dead animals. And so when a cow dies in Gujarat, the Dalits were asked to clear it away. But when they were clearing it away, they were subjected to violence by a mob of so-called cow protection squad, which is basically related to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, and these organizations basically, they claim that the cow is their mother, and they claim that the Dalits or the Muslims have killed their mother, they've killed the cow. So they stripped and beat up these a group of Dalit young men. But that incident at Una in Gujarat sparked off an enormously significant protest, because the Dalits then said, the cow is not our mother. If the cow is the mother for the upper caste, who then let them deal with the carcass of their mother. So they actually refused to further deal with the dead bodies of dead animals. And in fact, they flung the carcasses of cows in the municipality office, saying, if the cow is your mother, you take care of her. You do what you like with her. And we will not do this work anymore. And then they also demanded, they said, if we are not to do this work anymore, then we need, we need land. We have a right to land. There is a legal obligation of the government to give us land. So they began to demand land, struggle for land, and struggle for jobs under these already existing provisions under the law. So they began these struggles. Of course, these struggles have not been easy, but they have won some significant successes there. But the big success is that they called out this entire, Hindu majoritarian propaganda about the cow being the mother, and that being the excuse for violence against Dalits and minorities and Muslims. And one of the other very significant things about Una is that they reached out because they said, look, when we speak as Dalits, then Narendra Modi is forced to respond. But when Muslims are killed in the name of the cow, there is absolutely no response from the government, because this government is not interested in Muslim votes. So the Dalits spoke for the Muslims, and they said Dalits and Muslims are brothers, and they involved the Muslims in the struggles against this kind of atrocities in the name of cow protection and so on as well. Then you had this other very significant protest at Saharanpur in western Uttar Pradesh, where also there was there's a very significant organization there called the Bhim Army, which had been talking about pride, the Dalits' pride and dignity, but also they had been educating young Dalit people in local areas and all of that. Now, there was an attempt to provoke and mobilize Dalits against Muslims there by the BJP and by the RSS organization, Hindu right-wing organization. And the Dalits in that area refused to participate in such violence. And then as a reprisal against that, they were subjected to violence by the dominant caste in the area. And for resisting that violence, their leaders have been booked under National Security Act. They've been basically branded as though they're a terrorist threat, and Chandrasekhar Azad Ravan, which is what their leader's name is, one of their leaders' name is. He and several others are in fact in custody right now, in jail right now, and there is a nationwide campaign for their release. Now, in the same Uttar Pradesh, just to put things in perspective, you have Yogi Adityanath as the chief minister there, which is he's actually a priest in a temple, and he is also somebody who is a very one of the most vocal Hindu right-wing, hate speech mongers in India today. So the choice of him as chief minister says a lot about the BJP's worldview and what they would like to have for the whole country. Now, I'll just tell you one instance. Yogi Adityanath, when visiting, he was to visit a colony of Dalits from the Musahar community, which is one of the most oppressed and poorest communities in India, and in May 2017. And a day before his visit, the 100 or the Musahar Dalit families in this area called Mayanpur Dinapatti village in Kushinagar district, they were given bars of soap and sachets of shampoo by the local administration with instructions to clean themselves, wash themselves before attending the public meeting with the chief minister. So this was a tremendous, this kind of open humiliation done, by this administration. This is just an instance of what the attitude is towards Dalits there, okay? And you mentioned the Bathani and Lakshmanpur Vathi massacres, and I want to speak a little bit about these, drawing a slightly larger story there, okay? Because one of the things about this government and the BJP and RSS is their worldview and what I call their core ideology. I'm using the term advisedly because Modi used the term to taunt Hamid Ansari, the former vice president of the country, by telling him, now that you've stopped being vice president, you can go back to your core ideology. So I thought, we should talk about the core ideology of the RSS. And the RSS, basically when it relates to both Dalits or women, they like to talk about what they call social harmony. So this notion of social order, the Samajik Samrastha they call it, which means social harmony, which essentially means, it's like, everybody has their place, every community has its place in the hierarchy that will maintain social harmony. And those who are wanting to break that hierarchy are the ones who are challenging social harmony and creating violence. Everything will be peaceful as long as you maintain the caste order, as long as you maintain the patriarchal order. That is what the RSS core ideology is all about, and I want to elaborate on that a little. But first, I will draw on these massacres that Karthik mentioned right in the beginning, okay, which happened in Bihar in 1996-97. The context for these massacres was that they happened at a time when the Dalits and other oppressed castes of Bihar, most of them were laborers in agricultural areas in Bihar, rural areas in Bihar. And they had begun organizing under the Communist Party, under the CPI-ML. They had begun organizing, they began organizing for land, wages, and dignity. Apart from struggles for land, struggles for wages, and remember, this was a feudal setup where they would labor, but they would not be paid wages. They would be paid, something in kind, and they would be denied any right to bargain, any right of collective bargaining. And they were also fighting for dignity because they were saying we have a right to sit across on the same, on a charpai, on a raised platform, across with the, at the same level as the employer, and so on. And of course for the, for the rights of women, Dalit women, and so on. But also they were also fighting for a political right to vote because they were denied the right to even cast a vote. So the CPI was organizing to say we will cast our vote. We have every right to cast our vote and to elect a leader of our own choice. So they actually successfuli elected an MP from the CPI-ML in 1989 and then in 1995 two MLAs from the Bhojpur district in Bihar from the CPI-ML. This was seen as an unforgivable challenge to the upper caste and the dominant caste feudal forces in that area. And this was basically the Ranveer Sena. Ranveer Sena comprised, it was a private army, feudal private army. And it had a political aspect. If you look at Ranveer Sena literature, it used very similar literature to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, to the RSS, and it had BJP backing. A recent Cobra Post sting by the portal Cobra Post a couple of years back, they released sting videos of Ranveer Sena leaders saying that we did those massacres to deter the CPI-ML that was knocking on the door and challenging our hegemony in that area. And not only did they have this BJP collusion and backing, the government of the day then in Bihar was that of Lalu Prasad Yadav of the RJD, and the Lalu Yadav government, the RJD governments of the day, also colluded with the Ranjit Sena because they said that we, in order to push back the CPI-ML's assertion, social, political, economic, electoral assertion, we are willing to join hands with the forces of hell. This is what Lalu Yadav himself said in a speech. And to this day, Lalu Yadav has a good relationship with the Ranjit Sena leaders. Now, Dharmeshwar Singh, who was the Ranjit Sena chief, he, in one of his last interviews, I think with the New York Times, he said that he was interviewed by somebody, and he said in that interview that violence to maintain social harmony is not a sin. See, he's using that term, social harmony, to justify the massacre of women and children, and all of that. Now, Narendra Modi has a book on social harmony, which I'm going to come to in a few very shortly. But before that, I want to mention that whenever Modi invokes Ambedkar, which is a lot, he is also trying to whitewash Ambedkar of any subversive potential against the caste order. All right. So he will try to say, oh, Ambedkar never complained. Be like Ambedkar. Ambedkar didn't complain. Ambedkar was a great man, but he didn't complain. And so what the RSS and Modi try to say about Ambedkar is that they try to paint him as a Hindu unifier, that he wanted to get rid of caste divisions in order to unify Hindus. They ignore the fact that Ambedkar in fact said that Hindu Raj would be the biggest calamity for India. So Modi, in an article in Ambedkar, it is an article on Golwalkar, who is the RSS founder. It is a hagiographic piece by Modi in Gujarati. It's available in translation online. And Modi in that article mentioned Ambedkar as one of India's great souls. And he said, he described Ambedkar's greatness by calling him a modern day Manu. Remember Manu of the Manusmriti, the same Manusmriti that B.R. Ambedkar burnt. All right, he burnt the Manusmriti in protest because he saw the Manusmriti as a symbol of that oppressive caste and gender order, Brahminical order. But Modi praises Ambedkar by calling him a modern-day Manu. Now, Modi has this book also available, by the way, online on his website in various languages, including English. It's called Social Harmony, Samajik Samrasta, which I will talk about. I also want to mention that Ram Madhav, who is a BJP and RSS leader, in an article on 15th August, Independence Day recently, in the Indian Express, he mentioned how this government of the day basically represents the genius of India. And how does he describe the genius of India? He said that the genius of India lies in family, state, caste, guru, and festival. Notice that he also includes caste as part of this corpus of what he sees as being India's core, India's soul, core Indian values. And he makes a deliberate comparison of this with, right-wing attempts to say that the Trump administration is close to what represents core American values, right? In a way, he's actually speaking the truth as far as RSS's own ideology is concerned. Because even way back in 1949, when the Constitution was written, when the Constitution was adopted by India, which Ambedkar had helped to draft, at that time the RSS organizer had said about, that India's Constitution does not reflect the values of the Manusmriti. It had complained that, it should have been, the Manusmriti should have been India's Constitution. India's Constitution should have been based on the Manusmriti. Now, in Modi's book, Samajik Samrasta, he uses the metaphors which RSS often does of family and home. So the social harmony bit is actually comprised of the notion that Hindu caste hierarchy and gender hierarchy represents the home, ghar, family, or parivar, family. Okay, so this is a recurrent metaphor in RSS ideology. The RSS chief, for instance, described the RSS as being family is not feminist. So the idea of family hierarchies as a metaphor for all other hierarchies in society. And then the metaphor of the home is invoked to describe Hinduism as the home for Dalits and Muslims, and to prescribe and order them to return home, to do ghar wapsi. Basically, if they have gone to Buddhism or to Islam or to other religions, they should come back to the home of Hinduism. The metaphor of family is also used by the BJP to recast the relations between workers and bosses. So the BJP's 2014 election manifesto calls for harmonious relations within what they call the industry family, which means that, you should erode all the labor laws, because after all, the family doesn't have unions inside it, so even factories should not have unions inside them. In Modi's book, Samajik Samrasta, Social Harmony, he preaches Samar Nahi Samrasta, which means not war but harmony. So he claims that Ambedkar sought not to wage war on caste and make a break with Hindu religion and Hindutva politics, but to unite Hindu society. Okay? And in this book, very interesting, he positively narrates the story of somebody called Veer Meghmaya, who is a Dalit figure of Gujarat, and Modi tries to valorize him by saying, this is a story about somebody called Veer Meghmaya, who supposedly sacrificed his life in order to ensure that the entire city got water. But in exchange, he told the king that if I'm to give up my life, because my giving up my life will end a drought in the city, then in exchange you must ensure that the Dalits are basically included in the Hindu fold, and they're allowed to worship the Tulsi plant and the people tree and so on. Okay, so Modi tells his story and says, look, even his demands from the government are noteworthy. He asks for the right to worship the Tulsi and the people tree. Now he says, you people, Dalits, may think of asking for a 2-acre plot of land so that our children may be prosperous. Okay, but Veer Meghmaya did not ask for land. He did not ask for any personal or material benefit. His only thought was to integrate the entire Hindu community, and this is what Dr. Ambedkar came to do in the 20th century, which Veer Meghmaya did 1,000 years ago. This is what Modi says in his book. Okay. So the idea is that Dalits must aspire only to integration within the Hindu community as Dalits, and not for their rights, for land or wages or for any material benefits, or even for an end to humiliating practices, which is why Modi, in another book of his, had actually described manual scavenging as a spiritual activity. And Modi's book also, by the way, specifically cautions against the slogan Dalit Muslim Bhai Bhai, which means Dalits and Muslims are brothers, because he keeps referring to Muslims as foreign invaders and so on. And now when it comes to gender, see, the caste norms in India, the idea, how can caste be maintained, right? Caste is maintained through a variety of measures, and one of the key measures is to maintain control over women's sexuality, right? Because if women marry across caste boundaries, breaking caste boundaries, then caste also comes into threat. So women are sort of laid out on the boundaries of the caste system and the borders of the caste system. And so you have this entire anxiety throughout society about, which is often coded as safety. It's coded as daughter's safety. But actually the anxiety is not only about the daughters, the potential for daughters to be raped or to face sexual violence and for them to be safe from this, but it's also an anxiety about daughters going out of control and marrying those whom, from other communities or other castes that they are not supposed to do. Now, BJP taps in big time to this anxiety in many ways, BJP as well as some other political forces, right-wing political forces. And I want to end, my last point will be to flag this thing. This phenomenon, which is a very, very key and major phenomenon here. What they do is, they run this campaign saying any marriage of a Hindu woman with a Muslim man is love jihad, all right? So basically what this love jihad campaign does, and now it is echoed not only by the BJP and RSS and its organizations. If you want to read more about this, you can read, there's a Cobra Post sting called Operation Juliet on this as well, in which they recorded a number of BJP and RSS leaders talking about, how this love jihad happens. And they all quite candidly admit that women actually love these men. These are love relationships. But they still call their forcible separation of these couples as a rescue of the Hindu woman from the Muslim man. Now, these are basically, they're, it's a throwback to miscegenation laws in, say, the racist American South, or even to, Hitler's Germany, where Hitler also writes about the Jews in much the same terms and black people in much the same terms. So this is something. Love jihad is a pretext. So there's a systematic attack on women's autonomy, but it's also a pretext for a systematic attack on Muslim men. So even recently, one Muslim man was publicly butchered and in a videotaped massive murder by a man who claimed that he was doing this to avenge love jihad in Rajasthan. All right, this just happened a few days back. And you have the Muzaffarnagar riots happening on the same pretext, saying that a Hindu woman has been violated by Muslim men. And these also translate into a major assault on women's autonomy. In the only so-called love jihad case, the Meerut love jihad case, it turned out that the woman was not a victim of so-called love jihad at all. She ran away from her house, and she said she was in fact under threat from her family and community, and that she actually loved the Muslim man from whom she was being separated, and she is today married to him. But the thing is that what is dangerous is that you have huge TV channels, very influential TV channels in India, echoing the same stuff. So they're echoing the same kind of anti-Muslim Islamophobic rubbish about love jihad and making it out to be true. You even have courts in the country, for instance, the Kerala High Court in the Hadia case, also giving credence and legitimacy to so-called love jihad theories by actually saying a 24-year-old woman cannot choose to convert to Islam, cannot choose to marry who she pleases, and must be rescued from this situation. And it has ordered a probe by the National Intelligence Organization into her marriage, Hadia's marriage. And the Supreme Court also, instead of throwing this case out, is actually continuing with the probe. Now, Amit Shah, who is the BJP president, in the 2014 elections, he has, there are records of him giving speeches to Hindu communities in Western UP, but especially to Dalit communities in Western UP, telling them to beware of love jihad and beware of sexual violence by, quote-unquote, the community that rapes our mothers and daughters. So he was trying to use this so-called love jihad theory to get Dalits to consolidate as Hindus, to identify as Hindus against the Muslims. Now, the irony here is that all over the country, even till today, Dalit men are subjected to the same kind of violence if they happen to fall in love with and marry someone who is not a Dalit. This is happening everywhere. And there is even an organized political violence against Dalit men, which is absolutely similar to this love jihad type of propaganda and violence against Muslim men. In Tamil Nadu, for instance, the Pattali Makkal Katchi, PNK, which is trying to consolidate the Vaniyar community, it is for the last several years been campaigning against intercaste marriages, warning against Dalit men who are trying to marry, quote-unquote, our women, Vaniyar women, and it has unleashed violence against Dalit men in such marriages. It and several other, organizations representing the Vaniyars or Gaundar communities. So men like Inavarasan in 2015, Gokul Raj just very recently, these were killed. These men are being killed. There was another young man who married a non-Dalit woman, B. Shankar. B. Shankar was publicly hacked to death by people from the Tevar community for marrying a woman from the Tevar community. So these kinds of spectacles of violence against Dalit men. And in Ilavarasan's case, not only was he killed, but the Dalit community from which he came, villages were set on fire in Dharmapuri. They were subjected to arson and violence in the name of preventing such marriages. And over there, the propaganda, it uses the term love drama. CMK uses the term love drama, which is exactly like love jihad. So what I'm trying to say is that I think that caste, the structures of caste give us a language to understand a lot of what is happening in Indian politics today. And what we need to do is to actually connect the dots between caste violence, caste prejudice, and communal prejudice and communal violence, as well as gender and patriarchal violence, rather than keeping all these in separate boxes, rather than separating class from all of these and thinking of class as being some kind of abstract economic category. What we need to do is actually connect all the dots here and see how all of this, helps maintain Hindu right-wing political hegemony, how it helps their politics, and not only that, I'll just end with this point that it's not even true that these kinds of practices and structures are somehow alien to capitalism. You, in fact, have, as you know, remember how the BJP's manifesto talks about industry family, right? So you have capitalism also actually, you have multinational companies, transnational companies coming to India, shopping for docile labor. And they too are happy to have caste structures and gender patriarchal structures being used to discipline laborers and keep them docile. I have many instances of these, many examples of these especially, for instance, from garment factories in Tamil Nadu, where gender and caste methods of humiliation and violence and, denying Dalit women workers a mobile phone, making them clean up spit as a punishment, using sexualized slurs on them, and so on. These are very common ways of disciplining women labor there. And if you ask why you don't allow them to use a mobile phone, they'll say, oh, Tamil society needs this, their own families want this, etc. I'm just citing this very quickly to show you that even these are garment factories producing for transnational big brands. So the fact that even they have no real conflict with this ideology of caste and gender structures of this kind help to maintain class oppression as well. So we should be trying to connect the dots here and organize against these rather than seeing them in separate boxes. I'll end here. I hope that I haven't overshot my time. I think I've taken about half an hour, and I hope that what I've said can spark off a discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade. So before opening the Q&A, so I'd like to thank Comrade Kavitha for a very insightful talk on that. And always the ruling class reiterates that they devote to the order than the justice. And I'd like to mention a couple of points about the AKC's audio conference. Dr. Ambedkar has reiterated many times that caste is not only a religious problem but also a political and economical problem, especially in his book, What the Congress and the Gandhi has done to untouchables. He dealt with this political and economical problem, and he put Marxism against Gandhism. And AKC is also, meanwhile, critical about the ruling class imposed idea of politics among a significant section of the middle class, that politics is bad and it is irreparable, and all political parties are same, all politicians are corrupt, self-serving, etc. All this. But AKC has a different position on it. AKC is very much interested to uprise a political party on caste and class quotient based on their interventions. Based on this very understanding, AKC also invites the leaders and activists from the political parties, and of course outside the political parties too. So now I would like to open the floor for the question and answer, and I will unmute all of you soon. And Comrade Kavitha would like to take a couple of questions together, then she will answer according to the priorities she chooses. Now it's open to all.
What do you propose to do, or what do you suggest we should do as a society for younger women, who are in a very tender frame of mind right now, to, in this political and cultural environment going on in our country, to form the right set of values and to protect themselves from these ideologies that tend to domesticate them, that tend to violate a lot of their rights. So how do we go about with the younger generation, which is like a lot on internet, which is more westernized than our generation, which is like more into consumerism than we ever were.
Any other questions? I can take a couple together.
Yeah, hello, this is Pratyush. Thanks, Kavitha, for the excellent talk, and thanks, Karthik, for organizing it. Just quickly, Kavitha, you talked about the, structural violence, and especially what happened in Bathani Tola and Lakshmanpur Bate, etc. One of the things, that if you could elaborate on is when there is an assertion, especially maybe around elections or around the land issue or the wage issue, there is a lot of violence against women and especially, Dalits. But also there is, there is this whole emphasis of, and like you concluded about this intersection of caste, gender, and class. There is also a section which really wants to reinforce caste and would like to use it for their own benefit. And while, radical forces that, you've been, you're part of is more interested in annihilation of caste. So if you could just elaborate on, especially, there are forces, that work with, the folks sitting in the cabinet, like Athawale and Paswans of the world, who are more interested in not in the annihilation of caste, but more collaboration with class and caste forces. Thank you.
Shall I take those two?
I have one more question if nobody has any other questions.
Yeah. Sure.
I missed half an hour of your talk, so I don't know what you said earlier, but I'm really curious about this recent event of Raya Sarkar's list, especially because I think you were one of the feminists who signed a letter saying that you condemn this kind of name and shame strategy, and so I would like to know your comments about it.
Okay. I'll take those questions to begin with, shall I?
Yeah, sure.
So Karthik, I'm going ahead with answering the questions now. So the first one was about younger women, and I think that's a very perceptive question. See, I think that for the past several years I have seen that younger women in India, there's a lot of, tremendous pushback and resistance, I think. So I shouldn't, in any way undermine that resistance. I mentioned Una and Saharanpur, where also, in Una, there's a lot of women's participation also in those protests. But I also will mention some other significant events as well. Even in December 2012, those anti-rape protests that happened had a very large component of young women who were protesting against the curtailment of their freedom in the name of safety. So the idea that attacks on their autonomy are coded as safety, something that young women were very alive to then, and they were raising this, okay? They were raising their voice not only against individual rapists, but against, so-called caste panchayats and so on that restrict their, and even families that restrict their freedom. And that strain, I notice, has really continued now, because, for instance, recently, you may have followed that in Banaras Hindu University, and this is supposed to be an RSS stronghold, when women in particular are asked to sign bonds that they will not participate in any kind of protest or political activity if they are to become students and so on, There you had literally hundreds of young women students protesting against victim blaming and against the restrictive and discriminatory hostile rules that they have. And it was an absolutely remarkable outpouring of protest that has resonated with young women all over the country. Then you have women on several other campuses as well talking about discriminatory hostile rules and so on. And many of these movements are actually talking about caste as well. So to me, the real key thing here is that it's possible to make this kind of protest very one-dimensional if one wants, right? It's possible to say, okay, this is just about some, very narrowly defined freedoms of ours. But the other way to do it is to actually see and recognize that in order to fight this kind of patriarchy, one would also have to fight and recognize, caste hierarchies, caste structure, fight to annihilate caste, fight against communal violence, because when one recognizes that, in a way, our own freedom lies in fighting for everyone's freedom. So you can't fight for women's emancipation, but at the same time say, oh, I won't really bother about communal propaganda and violence. Because after all, protecting women and attacking women's autonomy is the pretext for communal violence, for violence against Muslims in so many places. Then even caste and gender, I think there are so many ways in which to understand the two together. Okay, one of the things which I often like saying is that, you see, if women are supposed to be, just like Dalits are assigned to certain forms of labor based on their birth, women also are assigned to certain forms of labor based on your birth. If you're born a woman, then you have to do kitchen work, housework, care work, etc. When we see these linkages, then we will learn to fight them together, and that's what I think needs to happen, and is happening. It encourages me to see that that's happening with so many of the young women's movements that I see all over India today. Okay, the second question is about structural violence and about I think that that's a perceptive question you ask, because I think that a lot of politicians in mainstream politics who claim to represent Dalits, okay, that includes the Lok Janshakti Party, that means Ramvilas Paswan or Jitan Ram Manji in Bihar, Ramdas Athavale of the RPI in Maharashtra, so many similar leaders. I think that you're very right that there is a avoidance on their part of talking about even annihilation of caste. Okay, so in a way, what they will talk about caste reservations to some extent, but they will completely avoid the issue of annihilation of caste, and they are basically aligning with the Bharatiya Janata Party and defending that alliance. Now, I am struck by their silence on, for instance, Ramvilas Paswan's silence or Jitan Ram Manji's silence on the Bathe or Lakshmanpur Bathe or Batanitola massacres. Why are they silent on this? Why are they silent on Una? Why are they silent on Saharanpur? In fact, I think it was Ramdas Athavale who recently said about the Una protest that this is a small thing, this is nothing. These are tiny things that happen. So they're playing down these things. So what I feel is that they are accommodating themselves with the Hindu communal forces, the Manuvadi forces, and in exchange for a small measure of power, all right? And I don't think that this is in any sense any model for emancipation at all of Dalits or anything like that. So I think that any kind of resistance, the hope for me comes from these protests we've seen against Rohit Vemula's murder, the protests we're seeing at Una, the protests we're seeing at Saharanpur, the protests we're seeing by the Dalits and oppressed people, of the Bhojpur area in Bihar. These are, movements, and not only there, sanitation workers in Bangalore, agricultural, rural women laborers, Dalit women laborers in Punjab. So many movements that are actually making these connections and taking on, politically resisting not only the Hindutva forces but caste structures in general, fighting for the annihilation of caste. I think that is important. The third question is about the list. I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about the list because I've written about it and I don't really want this conversation to get sidetracked by that. So I'll be very brief on that. I am saying we did not condemn the list or any such thing. We basically expressed it, some of us expressed it, disagreement with the measures adopted. That was not a disagreement with women survivors actually calling out their assaulters. That was not the problem. Our objection was with the manner in which the names were compiled, which is without context, without any narrative, without any stories to it. So it was a general, and it unraveled pretty fast because you notice that the list was very selective, and when other names began to come on, other lists were being formed, then even the people who prepared the first list basically began to say, no, we won't keep certain names on the list. So I think there was a lack of transparency about the measures adopted, about what processes were adopted exactly, which were part of it, which I had written about. And I don't buy the idea. I think by now it's very clear also. There was an attempt to say that, this is a divide between Dalit feminists and Savarna feminists. I don't think that's the case at all, because I don't think that Raya Sarkar herself is a Dalit feminist. I think that was not a correct claim. That was not a factually correct claim that she made. That has been called out by even people like Siddhartha Gidla and others who are themselves Dalit writers. They have called out this claim of hers. So that's why I don't think I think that's a red herring. And I think there's a civil way to talk about disagreements like this within the feminist movement, and without resorting to uncivil kinds of name calling.
Can you take
hello.
one more question?
Hello, this is Padma. Thank you, Kavitha, for a wonderful talk, and thank you, Karthik, for arranging all this. We are very happy. So I just have one comment, and then I have one question for Kavitha. My comment is that, as you rightfully said, the BJP has created a climate where crimes against people of Dalit caste are being committed with impunity. But we shouldn't forget that the Congress also has a very, has a terrible record of caste atrocities. And as you know, even in Andhra, under different governments, whether it is Congress or TDP, there have been any number of atrocities against Dalits. So I think when we frame the discussion of atrocities against Dalits, it should be really the Indian state, which is a purveyor of violence, and not just the BJP or the Congress. So that was a comment that I wanted to make. But my question is, or you could call it another comment, CPML has been called a party of Dalits, and it's considered that an honor, with all the struggles in Bihar and the amazing land struggles and struggles for assertion. And now it's very heartening from what you said in Karnataka and Bangalore, the sanitation workers' struggle, the Paurakarmika struggle is largely being waged by very brave women and women in leadership positions who are of Dalit caste.
Hello, Ms. Padma. So can you please make your question short, because we already 7:30.
Sure. So I just wanted to know, IPUA, how it is in terms of encouraging Dalit leadership in women. What are the steps you are taking?
Padma, I'll try and respond really briefly because I know we have very little time.
Sure.
On the first point, absolutely, definitely, the Indian state is implicated in maintaining these caste atrocities, caste violence, and deploying caste as a disciplinary measure all across in various fields, no doubt. Why I spoke particularly because I was asked to speak particularly about this political juncture, and I think that this is a juncture where Indian fascism is coming with a Hindutva face, and which is actually, so I wanted to just underscore how caste is so central to Indian fascism, the Indian variant of fascism, the Indian brand of fascism. So I just wanted to kind of underscore that in my talk. Second thing is about what you asked about CPIML. Absolutely. I think that in terms of, if you look at not only in Bangalore, if you look at Punjab, if you look at Bihar, in the CPIML struggles there is a very visible, vibrant leadership of Dalits and of Dalit women and women from oppressed castes and communities. And we do, both from in ITWA as well as in the party, we do make a particular effort to try and promote that. I still think that there's a lot more that we need to do on that front and in that count. So I'm not at all self-satisfied on that count in any sense. But I do think that there is progress being made there, and that I find these struggles and the leadership that's emerging from them very, very encouraging. Our Karnataka party has just had its first state conference, and there is a considerable number of women from these struggles who are in leadership positions in the party as well, and in the trade union as well as in the women's organization. So I find this particularly encouraging.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. This is Charan. Yeah, so I would like to ask a question where I would like to continue on that question raised by Shiva. So right now, that list has been out, and we know those professors are still in the university without any action being taken. So what do you say? So prosecuting them is a different one, but how are we going to protect those students who are actually came out and put that on the record that they were the victims of their assaults? Okay, so being from the students' organization, how do we actually support them? So I'm concerned about that. So can you elaborate a bit on that?
Then the point is that they have, if anybody comes out publicly, then of course there can be, one can demand this, and this is happening. This is happening all the time, all over India, where people are struggling to protect survivors who have come forward with their narratives and are demanding justice. Right? That's exactly what we were saying. The point is, in the list, as it has turned out, there are no narratives there. There is no context there. Nobody has come out there. So how is one supposed? And the Partha Chatterjee has given a response to the allegations to him. There has been no comeback after that. Nobody has come out to say, no, this is these are the specific allegations against you. So it is basically a form of branding, right? And what concerns me is that this nature of branding will be used against, especially against teachers from oppressed backgrounds and so on. So if we start legitimizing branding without any context, and we think that is all right, how can action be taken? How can action be taken based on an anonymous complaint without any details of the complaint, without saying, you molested so-and-so on such and such date and in such and such a manner? How can you protect, That it makes no sense to even ask this. There are ongoing struggles. For instance, the BHU struggle I mentioned. There are struggles all over the country where women are demanding better sexual harassment, anti-sexual harassment committees and cells and so on. They are fighting for those. In fact, the existing committees are under attack from this particular government. The GS cache of JNU has been destroyed. So these are struggles that are ongoing that we must strengthen. There really is no other shortcut, That's all I have to say about that.
But that reporting mechanism itself is absent in many of the universities and colleges, right? So how would you expect them to come out and...
For instance, that whole point is that then we have to fight for better reporting mechanisms. Where is the option? There is really no other shortcut here, right? Those struggles are ongoing. In BHU, there is no reporting mechanism. They are fighting for a better reporting mechanism. But how can you say that, it is enough to just bring out a name on an anonymous list curated by someone sitting in the US without saying this such and such thing happened to me? I know of at least some names on that list which are not to do with sexual harassment complaints. They're to do with consensual relationships. The women themselves have said they are in consensual relationships there. Now, this is somebody with a censorious eye, with a censorious, conservative eye, looking at those relationships and saying, well, I think that this shouldn't be happening, so I'm putting his name on the list. That isn't done. That's not correct. That is not. There's nothing feminist about that. So I don't want that conversation to be taken away by that stuff. Please.
Yeah. Okay.
I would request for this conversation not to be derailed by this list, please. I've said what I have to say about that, and we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah. Thank you. So we will.
Hi, my name is Danya. I'm gonna ask a quick question. I've been on social media, and I'm trying to confront the so-called godmen, and or rather the quarks and the fake gurus that we have, and who are also supported by many corporate executive leaders and so on. And I've been very troubled and quite disturbed by the fact that these guys are running schools, and it's very troubling to see students doing some kind of superpower tricks and all sorts of nonsense. So I'm trying to, I've been trying to go through the Wikipedia link and trying to reinstate the Wikipedia link to its past state, where a lot of content has been removed. I don't know if it relates to the current discussion, but I wonder if you can shed some light on how I could confront and try to stop these fake gurus.
Got me. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question you asked, and I'll try and briefly respond to that. See, one of the things is that, for instance, if you look at Ram Rahim, this man who was the guru in Godman in Punjab, who was outed as a rapist by two women very courageously, and he's an extremely violent person who got even a reporter who reported on this on the complaint bumped off and all of that. Okay, the thing is that his organization there, the Dera Sachcha Sauda, has a lot of support and presence among extremely poor and oppressed Dalit people in Punjab. I want us to understand how that is happening and why. I don't think this is just about, it isn't enough just to say false consciousness and, people are stupid or something like that. That's not the case, right? The case over here is that, there's a complete failure on the part of the state to provide basic services. For instance, everything from food and dignity and a sense of community to something like, for instance, getting rid of addictions and so on, okay? So what the Dera was providing, and I have interacted with people who were members of the Dera and who then, came in touch with our party and joined our movements. And I would ask them, why are you supporters of this person? This is some years back. And they would say that, well, I was addicted to drink or I was addicted to drugs, and joining the Dera helped me to break that addiction. Now, you don't have any measures offered by the state for that purpose. So there is a complete vacuum there, and these, the state, in fact, you have government and you have government leaders, political leaders funding the Dera, funding these governments. So instead of providing state structures that are secular in nature, what you're having is that these godmen are basically being backed by the state, and then they help to deliver votes, they help to control these communities, they help to control, to hold sway over sections of the population. So I think that fighting them is quite a tough one. I don't think it's possible only online and all of that. I don't know very much about online activism and how to do that, so I won't advise on that. I don't know enough about that to speak about that, but I think that, one of the things that we try to do on the ground is to basically try and be sensitive to and understand how this entire thing works. It isn't enough just to say, oh, these people are, cheats and people are silly for falling for this. Actually, the attempt has to be to provide some kind of alternative sense of community and sense of being part of a larger community of resistance, and and fighting for these services to be provided by the state rather than by a Dera, by a godman. And the other thing I'd like to say is that within these godman communities, the idea that it's completely any institution in which power is completely you're not allowed to challenge power. if that institution is a family, if that institution is a godman's community, if it's a school, if it's a teacher, we know those breed sexual violence. We know they do. And that is precisely what's happening in all these communities. So I think it's also about changing the ways in which we in India talk about even the ways in which children are supposed to behave in families, in which people are supposed to behave in religious institutions. So the idea that you can be even part of a religious community but still have the right to ask questions, still have the right to challenge authority, that is also something as a larger culture which I think one has to promote. It's not just about rejecting religion or religious community. Even if people are part of a religious community, they should have democratic rights, right?
Yeah, Comrade, thank you. So